All right, now this is some great news for hungry students. Schools will now be providing every child and teenager with free breakfast and lunch through the end of 2020 in the U.S. This move from the Agricultural Department comes after pressure from Congress and school officials to make sure that needy children are fed amidst the coronavirus pandemic. And we have Joel Berg, the CEO of Hunger Free America, joining us now to break down just why this is so important. So, Joel, first of all, tell us why school officials have been so concerned about feeding children. You know, what population is currently the most at risk here?
Tens of millions of American children face the threat of hunger or poverty in America. And in the pandemic, when schools closed, 30 million American children lost free and reduced price school meals. And we've had a trend in the United States, like in Israel, where people have been pushing back against guaranteed safety net programs with the false promise that charity could somehow fill in the gap. So it was really outrageous that in the worst economic collapse in modern history, the Trump administration was insistent that they were going to use school kids as sort of pawns, as hostages, in fact, to say, oh, even if it's not safe to go back, you should reopen your school just so your kids can eat. So this reversal, they're coming to terms with basic common sense and compassion, is so important because it's going to allow at least some kids to continue to eat, even if their schools are closed due to the pandemic.
Right. You know, and what I want to ask you about was how coronavirus and the pandemic specifically has exacerbated hunger. But it seems that you're also saying that just the lack of access to food is one of the major issues here. So it goes beyond just people being out of work, right?
Even before this epidemic, there were 37 million Americans living in households that couldn't afford enough food, 11 million American children. It's because wages are too low and the safety net is too scarce. And many industrialized Western nations, from Western Europe to, frankly, Israel, have followed this model of the U.S. of having lower wage jobs, having a smaller safety net, and then saying people fend for themselves or go to charities. So the pandemic has taken people who are poor and hungry and made them poorer and hungrier, and has taken people who are just at the edge of poverty and hunger because their wages were so low and made them hungry. And so we've had just the worst possible series of public policy responses to this: aversion to science, aversion to compassion, rewarding the rich. Everything they could do wrong, they did do wrong, and made a horrible situation far, far worse, both for hunger and the healthcare situation.
So let's talk about this policy now. I mean, do school officials feel that this move is enough to help kids? Is extending meals through 2020 enough?
Not nearly enough. First of all, it should go throughout the whole school year, which in the States would go till next May or June. Secondly, a lot of kids still aren't picking up the meals because their parents would have to take them in very difficult situations to go to these sites to pick up the meals. And lastly, this only covers, if you're lucky, breakfast and lunch, not dinner, not vacations, not weekends. And so there's really no substitute for creating more jobs, ensuring they pay a living wage, and what we call the SNAP program, which used to be called the food stamps program, that provides money to parents with kids. The House of Representatives, controlled by Democrats, passed a bill that would extend these programs 109 days ago. And the U.S. Senate, led by Republican Mitch McConnell and backed by President Trump, has refused to extend those programs on, frankly, the ridiculous notion that if you feed people, they won't want to work.
So if you could give us a quick answer, because we're running a bit low on time. I mean, what do you want to happen? What is the goal here?
I want our Congress and our president to endorse a full-fledged economic recovery plan that has more money for unemployment compensation and a serious expansion of food.
All right, well, that was a very clear answer. Joel, thank you so much for joining us and breaking this down. Such an important issue that you're tackling.